At my brother's promotion party, he found it entertaining to introduce me like this. This is my sister in no degree. No future, just depending on the family. Everyone, including our parents, laughed. I didn't react. I just smiled, raised my glass, and said cheers. This is the last time any of you will ever see me. Then I walked off the room, went completely silent. Okay, gather round, because there's a story I need to tell you. A story about family, betrayal, and finding your voice when everyone else wants you to be silent. Can you imagine being publicly humiliated by your own brother in front of hundreds of people at a celebration? My parents even laughed along. That night, a chill went down my spine, but a fire lit in my soul. I didn't flinch. I just smiled, lifted my glass, and said, "Cheers. This is the last time any of you will see me." The room went completely silent. What the hell happened next? My name is Jenna, and I'm a 28-year-old artist from Boston. For so long, family was everything to me, especially my relationship with my brother, Adam. He chased degrees and corporate success, while I followed my passion for art, even if my family clearly saw it as a pointless hobby. I never, not in a million years, thought that at his big promotion party, Adam would use me as the family joke. But that night, it changed absolutely everything between us. It wasn't just a turning point, it was an earthquake. Before I tell you how my own family shattered me and how I painstakingly rebuilt myself, you need to understand our world. I grew up in a household where academic achievement wasn't just encouraged, it was practically a religion. My father, Thomas, was this towering figure, a leading cardiothoracic surgeon, his reputation built on life-saving procedures and medical breakthroughs. Every single dinner conversation was a saga of his latest triumphs. My mother, Diana, equally formidable, held a tenured position in the English department at a prestigious university, constantly publishing, winning awards for her literary criticism. Their wedding photos weren't just about love, they proudly displayed 3 advanced degrees between them. And then there was Adam. 3 years older, he was the embodiment of everything my parents worshipped. Perfect report cards, science competitions, captain of the debate team, valedictorian. The college acceptance letters piled up. All 8 Ivy Leagues, can you believe it? The weeks of agonizing deliberation over which prestigious path he'd choose. The sheer pride when he finally settled on Harvard Law. I swear, I sometimes thought their faces might crack from beaming so hard. I loved Adam, you know, deeply. Before academics consumed him, we built epic blanket forts, invented intricate backyard games, shared whispered secrets long after bedtime. He protected me from bullies. He taught me to ride my bike. 4 years, he was my hero, my confidant, my best friend. But then, something shifted during his high school years. His relentless accomplishments created a chasm between us, widening with every award ceremony, every honor roll. Meanwhile, I struggled with traditional education from the start. My second-grade teacher actually called my parents because I kept drawing elaborate pictures instead of doing math worksheets. Middle school report cards always said the same thing. Bright but unfocused. Creative but distractible. High school. Oh, high school was just an exercise in pure endurance. I could write compelling essays, create stunning art projects, but standardized tests were my personal nemesis. Numbers swam before my eyes, historical dates refused to stick, and scientific formulas felt like an alien language. Yet, my artistic talents flourished during this same period. I won regional art competitions, had my work displayed in youth galleries, received genuine praise from professional artists. But at our dinner table, these achievements were met with quick, almost dismissive nods, before the conversation inevitably swung back to Adam's latest academic triumph or my parents' professional successes. My art was a cute diversion, never a real calling. The inevitable conflict erupted during my senior year college application season. I wanted to attend art school. My parents, of course, insisted on a traditional 4-year university, maybe an art minor, if I maintained perfect grades. The arguments grew heated. My father, with a dismissive wave of his hand, declared he wouldn't waste money on a degree in finger painting. I shot back that I wouldn't waste years studying subjects that would never serve my future. My mother tried to mediate, but ultimately, she sided with my father. Adam, home from his first year at Harvard, pulled me aside during one particularly bitter argument. I thought, finally, he might offer support, or at least some understanding. Instead, he just advised me to just get the degree to make everyone happy. It was the first time I truly realized he didn't see my art as a legitimate path. To him, it wasn't passion, it was just stubbornness, a childish refusal to conform. So, after graduation, while my classmates headed to dormitories and freshman orientations, I made my decision. I took a job at a local coffee shop, rented a tiny studio apartment with 2 roommates, and enrolled in night classes at a community art center. My parents, smug as ever, predicted I'd come crawling back within 6 months, begging for college tuition. Adam, ever the gambler, bet it would be 3. The early years, yeah, they were rough, really rough. I worked multiple service jobs, took any design gig I could find, logos for local businesses, wedding invitations, illustrations for self-publishing authors. Piece by piece, I built my portfolio. I lived on ramen noodles and sheer, bloody determination. During family gatherings, which became increasingly infrequent, I endured the constant questions about when I'd get a real job or go back to school. My answers about building my freelance business were met with skeptical looks, followed by an immediate change of subject. It was soul-crushing. 10 years passed like this. Adam, predictably, graduated from Harvard Law with honors, clerked for a federal judge, and landed at Peterson and Mitchell, one of Boston's most prestigious corporate law firms. He was living the dream my parents had mapped out. Meanwhile, I was quietly building a growing reputation in graphic design, slowly but surely securing a client base that allowed me to finally quit those service jobs and focus entirely on creative work. I got my own apartment, built a professional website, even hired an assistant to handle administrative tasks. My design started winning awards in industry publications. Major companies began inquiring about my services. Not that my family noticed, of course. At holiday gatherings, my parents still introduced Adam as our son, the lawyer, while I remained our daughter with a hobby. When I shared news about landing a major client or receiving industry recognition, the response was always this polite disinterest, immediately followed by a pivot to Adam's latest courtroom victory. It was a pattern so familiar, so ingrained, it almost didn't sting anymore. Almost. So, when the invitation arrived for Adam's promotion party, I felt that familiar mix of family obligation and a deep, gnawing dread. After 5 years at Peterson and Mitchell, he was being made partner, the youngest in the firm's history. My mother called to ensure I would attend, adding, "And please, wear something appropriate, not your usual artistic outfits." The subtle dig stung, but I agreed to come. Despite everything, I held on to this tiny, foolish hope that someday, somehow, my success would finally register with them, that they would eventually see my path as valid, valuable in its own right. I had no idea. I truly had no idea that this party would become the breaking point, the night that would sever my family ties and force me to completely redefine my sense of self-worth. The invitation specified black tie attire, so I did something totally out of character. I invested in a dress I couldn't really afford. A sleek, midnight blue gown with a subtle shimmer. It was elegant, understated, the kind of dress that said, "I belong in upscale professional settings." It cost $300 that I probably should have saved for new design software. Another $100 on shoes that wouldn't embarrass my fashion-conscious mother. I even scheduled a professional hair appointment, something I never consider necessary. The week before the party, I poured myself into my studio, creating a custom piece for Adam. Despite our complicated, often tense relationship, I genuinely wanted to give him something meaningful. I designed a stylized skyline of Boston, intricately incorporating subtle references to landmarks from our childhood. The park where we played, our favorite ice cream shop. In the corner, nearly hidden, I included 2 tiny figures that resembled us as children. The piece took 16 hours to complete. I had it professionally framed, custom matte, museum-quality glass. It was a gift that showcased both my professional skills and our personal connection. I hoped, foolishly perhaps, that it would make him see the value in my chosen path. The morning of the party, I rehearsed responses to the inevitable questions about my career. I practiced concise descriptions of my recent projects, memorized impressive client names, and worked on explaining my business growth, in terms that business-minded people would appreciate. I reminded myself, standing before my mirror, that my annual income now matched what many college graduates earned. That I owned my work rather than renting my time. That I had built something from nothing through pure talent and perseverance. I practiced smiling through uncomfortable comments. I'm doing well, thank you. Business has been excellent this quarter. I just signed a contract with a national retail chain. Yes, I'm completely self-employed. No, I don't regret not going to college. The freelance market for designers is actually quite robust. I just kept repeating it, trying to convince myself as much as anyone else. I took an Uber to the Fairmont Hotel, a historic landmark in downtown Boston, known for hosting political fundraisers and society weddings. The driver asked if I was attending a special event, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a surge of pride as I explained my brother was being made partner at his law firm. For that brief ride, I actually basked in reflected glory, in the warmth of familial connection, completely unaware of how the night would actually unfold. The hotel lobby gleamed with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Following the signs to the Peterson and Mitchell event, I approached the ballroom with a growing knot of anxiety. Outside the doors, my parents already stood, chatting animatedly with people I assumed were Adam's colleagues. My mother, in a designer dress I recognized from luxury store windows. My father, his tuxedo custom-tailored. They made a striking couple, still handsome and distinguished in their early 60s. Mom! Dad! I called out, waving as I approached. My father merely nodded in acknowledgement, continuing his conversation without pause. My mother turned, gave me a quick, critical assessment, before pecking my cheek with a kiss that never quite landed. "You're late," she whispered, smoothing my already smooth hair. "The invitation said 7, I replied, showing her the card I'd brought in my clutch. "The family was asked to arrive early," she said with a slight frown. "Adam specifically mentioned it to us. Didn't he call you?" "He didn't," I said. It wasn't an oversight. Adam had long stopped including me in any family coordination. "Well, you're here now," my mother said, already turning back to the group she'd been speaking with. "Find your place card inside. I believe you're at table 11. My father finished his conversation long enough to give me a brief, one-armed hug. "Good to see you, Jennifer," he said, using my full name as he always did. "It's Jenna, Dad." I corrected automatically, though he'd been making the same mistake for 28 years. Right, he nodded distractedly before spotting someone across the room. "You'll have to excuse me. That's Judge Williams. I should say hello." And he was gone. I stood alone for a moment before making my way into the ballroom. Round tables, draped in white linens, surrounded a small dance floor. Each centerpiece featured white roses and miniature replicas of law books. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Servers in black ties circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I spotted Adam immediately. Tall and broad-shouldered like our father, he stood at the center of an admiring circle. His tuxedo fit perfectly, his hair expertly styled, his gestures confident as he told a story that had his audience laughing appreciatively. Success looked natural on him, as though he'd been born for this exact moment. I hesitated, clutching my gift bag, unsure whether to approach. Adam, thankfully, solved my dilemma by glancing up and noticing me. He said something to his group, then broke away and strode toward me. "Jenna, you made it," he said, kissing my cheek. His cologne was expensive, his smile practiced. "Congratulations on the promotion," I said genuinely. "This is quite a celebration." "Firm tradition," he replied with a casual wave. "Every new partner gets the full treatment. Most of the guests are colleagues and clients, but I insisted on family too. Though I see you missed the photos." "I wasn't told about them," I said, but managed to keep my tone light. "I brought you something." I extended the gift bag. Adam took it with a distracted, "Thank you," immediately setting it on a nearby table without even looking inside. "I'll check it out later. Come meet some people." He led me to a group of impeccably dressed professionals who regarded me with polite curiosity. "This is my sister," Adam announced, without offering my name or profession. One woman extended her hand. "I'm Stephanie Morris, head of corporate litigation." "What firm are you with?" Before I could answer, Adam laughed, a loud, dismissive sound. "Oh, Jenna's not a lawyer. She's an artist. She draws pictures. I'm actually a graphic designer, I clarified, my voice carefully steady. I run my own studio specializing in branding and commercial illustration. How interesting, Stephanie said, in that tone people use when they find something anything but interesting. And where did you study? I'm self-taught, I replied. I've been building my business for 10 years now. Adam jumped in, almost cutting me off. Jenna decided college wasn't her thing. He made air quotes around decided, drawing knowing smiles from his colleagues. Excuse me, I said, pretending to spot someone across the room. I need to say hello to someone. I retreated to the bar, ordered a glass of white wine, and took a long, steadying breath. The evening had barely begun, and already I felt so small, so utterly diminished. I tried to remind myself, I have nothing to prove to these people. My work speaks for itself. My clients value my talent. My bank account validates my choices. But the small cuts, they kept coming. During dinner, I was seated at a table far from the main party, with distant relatives and a couple of administrative staff. When conversation turned to careers, any flicker of interest in my work evaporated the moment I mentioned my lack of formal education. During the pre-dessert mingling, my mother introduced me to her university colleagues as her daughter who has always been creative. Her tone suggesting creativity was a charming but utterly useless trait. I overheard my father telling his medical friends about Adam's academic achievements, detailing every single honor from kindergarten perfect attendance to law school law review. When someone politely asked about me, he replied that I was finding my way, still figuring things out. I was 28 years old with an established, successful business. Yet, in his eyes, I remained eternally unfinished, permanently in progress. As dessert was being served, the firm's managing partner took to the small stage and tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "it's time to celebrate our newest partner, Adam Harrison." Applause filled the room as Adam made his way to the stage. He looked perfectly at ease, born for the spotlight. I clapped along with everyone else, still clinging to this desperate hope that somewhere in his speech, he might acknowledge that success comes in different forms. I watched with growing anticipation as the moment approached when my brother would publicly recognize our family. I couldn't have imagined how utterly, painfully wrong I was about to be. The ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel represented everything my family valued: luxury, tradition, exclusivity. Crystal chandeliers, pressed white tablecloths, polished silver. The firm had spared no expense. Fresh floral arrangements, their perfume mixing with expensive cologne and the aroma of gourmet food. Everything about the environment screamed that this was a place for people who had followed the rules, climbed the proper ladders. I sipped my wine, observing the social dynamics. The hierarchy was clear, from senior partners commanding attention to junior associates laughing a bit too loudly at their superiors' jokes. Families of other lawyers nodded with easy familiarity. I recognized none of them. Then, an older gentleman approached my isolated corner. He introduced himself as Harold Peterson, the founding partner, now semi-retired. Mr. Peterson had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "You must be Adam's sister," he said, extending his hand. "You look like him around the eyes." "I am," I confirmed. "Jenna Harrison. Adam speaks highly of your creative talents," he said, surprising me completely. "My granddaughter is interested in art. Do you have any advice for young people pursuing creative fields?" For a moment, I felt truly visible. I enthusiastically shared thoughts about building portfolios, finding mentors, developing business skills alongside artistic ones. Mr. Peterson listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions. Our conversation was interrupted when my mother appeared, slipping her arm through Mr. Peterson's. "Harold, I see you've met Jenna," she said. "I hope she hasn't been boring you with her little projects." "Not at all," he replied. "We were having a fascinating discussion about creative entrepreneurship." My mother laughed as though he'd said something amusing, rather than factual. "Well, there's someone you simply must meet," she said, already steering him away. "The university president is here, and he's been asking about your scholarship fund." Mr. Peterson allowed himself to be led, but turned back to give me a sympathetic smile. "Nice meeting you, Jenna. Keep up the good work." That brief, positive interaction only highlighted how profoundly uncomfortable the rest of the evening had been. I attempted to join a conversation between my father and several doctors, only to have him place his hand on my shoulder and guide me away with a whispered, "This is a discussion about hospital politics, Jennifer. You wouldn't understand the context." When I tried chatting with a group of younger lawyers, they became awkwardly formal once they realized I wasn't in the legal profession, their eyes scanning the room for more advantageous networking opportunities. Even the catering staff seemed to sense my outsider status, repeatedly passing me by before I could take an appetizer from their trays. Around 9 o'clock, the gift presentation began. Partners and colleagues presented Adam with expensive tokens of their esteem, monogrammed cufflinks, rare whiskey, vintage law books. Each gift was met with appropriate appreciation and witty remarks from my brother, who had clearly practiced his gracious recipient routine. When the formal gifts concluded, my mother nudged me. "You said you brought something?" I nodded, retrieving my carefully wrapped package from the gift table, where it sat untouched. As I approached Adam, he was deep in conversation with the managing partner. I stood awkwardly, waiting to be acknowledged. "Excuse me," I finally said after nearly a minute of being ignored. Adam turned, with barely concealed impatience. "Yes, I wanted to give you this," I said, offering the package. "I made it for your promotion." He took it with a distracted, "Thanks," and carelessly tore the wrapping. Nothing like the careful appreciation he'd shown for the other gifts. The custom frame caught the light as he held up the artwork with a puzzled expression. "It's the Boston skyline," I explained, trying to sound cheerful, "with places from our childhood hidden in the details. See, there's the park where we used to play, and the ice cream shop on the corner. And those two small figures there. That's nice," he interrupted, clearly uninterested in the personal touches that had taken me hours to incorporate. He set the artwork down against the wall without even finishing his examination. "Not really my style, but thanks for the thought." My mother appeared beside him and glanced at the piece. "Oh, another one of your drawings," she said, as though I'd presented him with a crayon scribble rather than a professional piece worth hundreds of dollars. "That's sweet, dear." She picked it up and squinted at it. "Is this supposed to be Boston? The proportions seem off." "It's stylized, Mom," I explained, trying, desperately, to keep the disappointment from my voice. "It's not meant to be photorealistic." "Well, it's the thought that counts," she said, setting it back down and straightening Adam's already perfect tie. "The photos from earlier came out beautifully. The photographer said he's never seen such a photogenic family." The implication that the family photos were complete without me was not lost on anyone. As dinner concluded and the formal program approached, I found myself increasingly isolated. I checked my watch repeatedly, calculating how soon I could leave without causing a scene. The answer, unfortunately, was not until after Adam's speech and at least the first dance. I made my way to the ladies' room for a moment of blessed peace. Inside, I found two young women I recognized as legal associates from Adam's table. They were touching up their makeup and didn't notice me enter a stall. "Can you believe his sister?" the first one said. "She looks so out of place." "I know," the second agreed. "Adam told me she's some kind of starving artist who refused to go to college. His parents are still supporting her financially." I froze. Blood rushed to my face. The accusation was a complete, outright lie. I hadn't taken a dime from my parents since I was 20. Not even when I'd had pneumonia and couldn't work for 6 weeks. I'd eaten ramen and depleted my savings rather than ask for help. Such a disappointment compared to him, the first woman continued. He said they keep inviting her to family events out of obligation, but she doesn't really fit with their social circle. I must have made a sound, a little gasp, because both women suddenly went silent. I waited until they left before emerging, hands shaking as I washed them at the sink. My reflection showed flushed cheeks and overly bright eyes. I took several deep breaths, determined not to let them see me affected. Returning to the ballroom, I found the lights dimmed and attention focused on the small stage where the managing partner was introducing Adam. My father caught my eye from the front table and frowned, gesturing at his watch. I slipped into an empty seat at the very back, unwilling to cause a scene by walking to the family table. Now, as Adam took the microphone and began his speech, I tried to focus on breathing evenly, on maintaining my composure. I still, despite everything, believed that when he acknowledged his family's support, he would include me with some small, kind mention. Maybe a joke about his artistic sister, who took a different path but still supported him. Maybe even a thank you for attending despite our differences. I couldn't have been more wrong. The moment that proved it was rapidly, horrifyingly approaching. Adam stood on that small stage, commanding the attention of every person in the room. The spotlight emphasized his perfect posture, his confident smile, his tailored tuxedo. He began by thanking the firm partners for their mentorship, delivering carefully crafted compliments to each senior attorney by name. The crowd nodded appreciatively. He spoke about his commitment to the firm's values, his vision for contributing to its prestigious legacy. I started to relax slightly. Perhaps the speech will remain purely professional, I thought. Asterisk sparing me any family references at all. That would be better than a negative mention. Asterisk, I picture myself slipping out during the applause, texting my congratulations later from the safety of my apartment. But then Adam shifted gears. Now, for the personal acknowledgments, he said, his voice warming, that saccharine tone that always signaled trouble. I wouldn't be standing here tonight without the unwavering support of my family. The spotlight widened to include my parents at their front row table. They beamed with pride, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. My father placed his hand over his heart in a grand gesture. My father, Dr. Thomas Harrison, Adam continued, taught me the value of precision, excellence, and dedication. My mother, Professor Diana Harrison, instilled in me a love of language and persuasive communication. Together, they showed me that with discipline and focus, any goal is achievable. My parents stood to receive a round of applause. My mother blew Adam a discreet kiss. I clapped along with everyone else, feeling that familiar pang of exclusion, but nothing I hadn't experienced countless times before. Maybe he would stop there, I hoped. Maybe family acknowledgments were complete. Adam raised a champagne glass. I'd like everyone to raise a glass to the people who shaped me into the man I am today. The room complied, glasses lifting in unison. To my mentors, my parents, and my friends, Adam said. And of course, his eyes scanned the room, sweeping over faces until they found mine, sitting there in my back corner. A smile, slow and chilling, spread across his face. It wasn't his genuine smile. It was the one I'd seen when he was about to win an argument at someone else's expense. And of course, Adam continued, gesturing toward me with his glass, to my sister Jenna, who joined us tonight. The spotlight, with almost comical cruelty, swung wildly until it located me, its brightness temporarily blinding after the dimness of my corner. I felt every single eye in the room turn to examine me. I managed a small, forced smile and a slight nod, praying this moment would pass quickly. Adam chuckled into the microphone. For those who don't know her, this is my sister. No degree, no future, just Freelo's off the family. She's our cautionary tale of what happens when you don't apply yourself. The room erupted in laughter. And my parents, rather than defending me, rather than showing even a hint of concern, joined in. My father shook his head in mock disapproval, while my mother covered her smile with her hand, both clearly comfortable with me as the family joke. The spotlight remained fixed on me, mercilessly exposing every micro-expression that crossed my face. I felt heat flood my cheeks, and a rushing sound filled my ears. Time seemed to slow down, each second stretching painfully as the laughter continued. In that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't a one-time humiliation. This was simply the public version of how my family had always seen me. Every diminished accomplishment, every backhanded compliment, every comparison to Adam, it all appeared in perfect clarity as parts of a consistent, brutal pattern. I had been the family disappointment from the moment I chose my own path, and nothing I achieved would ever change that perception for them. I had two choices. I could flee the room in tears, confirming their belief in my instability and immaturity, or I could respond with the dignity they clearly didn't think I possessed. With deliberate, almost serene calm, I stood up. The laughter began to subside as people noticed my movement. I walked slowly toward the front of the room, feeling the scorching weight of every gaze. The spotlight followed me, highlighting my journey from shadow to center stage. When I reached the main table, I picked up an untouched champagne flute. I looked directly at Adam, who was still standing at the microphone. His expression had shifted from smug amusement to a flicker of confusion. He hadn't expected a reaction beyond embarrassed acceptance or a hasty, tearful departure. I raised my glass toward him, mirroring his earlier gesture. My hand was perfectly steady. I smiled, not a hurt smile, not an angry one, but the calm, resolute smile of someone making a life-changing decision with absolute certainty. "Cheers," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the now silent room. "This is the last time any of you will see me." I took a sip of champagne, set the glass down gently, and turned to leave. The click of my heels against the hardwood floor echoed in the complete silence that had fallen over the ballroom. No one called after me. No one tried to stop me. Perhaps they thought it was a dramatic gesture rather than a genuine farewell. As I retrieved my wrap from the coat check, I heard the hum of conversation resume behind me. Adam's amplified voice, making some joke to dispel the awkwardness. By the time I stepped into the cool night air, applause had broken out again, the celebration continuing without interruption. In the taxi home, I didn't cry. Not a single tear. I felt oddly calm, like someone watching a film of someone else's life. The city lights blurred past the window as I made mental lists of what needed to be done. This wasn't an impulsive reaction, you see. This was the final, agonizing acknowledgement of a truth I had been avoiding for years. My family would never see me as I truly was, and continuing to seek their approval would only destroy me, piece by agonizing piece. The driver asked if I was okay, and I realized I'd been sitting in silence outside my apartment building for several minutes after we'd arrived. "Yes," I replied, surprising myself with how certain I felt. "For the first time in years, I think I really am." The moment I entered my apartment, I switched my phone to airplane mode. I knew the texts and calls would start once the event ended, once my absence registered as more than just a dramatic exit. I needed time to think clearly, without their voices in my head. My cat, Jasper, greeted me with his usual indifference that gradually shifted to curiosity as I began pulling luggage from my closet instead of changing into pajamas. I moved with purpose, packing only what I absolutely needed. Clothes for a week, my laptop, essential toiletries, my external hard drives containing all my work files, and a small box of irreplaceable personal items. Everything else could be replaced or retrieved later. Jasper watched from the bed, tail twitching, as I moved around the apartment with unusual energy for midnight. When my suitcase and laptop bag were packed, I picked up Jasper and held him close, breathing in his familiar scent. I had rescued him from a shelter 3 years earlier, a scraggly, one-eyed tabby that no one wanted. We understood each other. "I need to make some calls, buddy," I whispered, scratching behind his ears, the kind of calls you make when no one else is listening. I booked a pet-friendly hotel room downtown for 2 weeks, paying the premium without hesitation. I emailed my 2 current clients, explaining I had a family emergency and would be working remotely for a while, but assuring them all deadlines would be met. I set up mail forwarding to a post office box I would establish the next day. At 2 a.m, I finally turned my phone back on. As expected, there were multiple missed calls and texts. Most were from my mother, ranging from confused, "Where did you go?" to irritated, "You're being very dramatic," to concerned, "Are you driving? Please respond." My father had called once but left no message. Adam hadn't reached out at all. I texted my mother simply, "I'm safe. I need space. Please respect that." Then I turned off my phone again, set my alarm for 7, and tried to sleep. When sleep wouldn't come, I stared at the ceiling and mentally redesigned my life from scratch. At 7, I loaded Jasper into his carrier, packed my bags into an Uber, and left my apartment key with my neighbor, Lisa, asking her to water my plants until I figured out next steps. She didn't ask questions. She just hugged me and said to call if I needed anything. Some people understand boundaries instinctively. The hotel room was small but clean, with a kitchenette and decent Wi-Fi. I set up my laptop on the desk, created a makeshift litter box area in the bathroom, and unpacked just enough to function. Then I made a list of practical tasks. Find a new apartment, preferably in a different neighborhood or even a different city. Notify my landlord I wouldn't be renewing my lease. Update my business contact information. Establish new banking relationships, separate from the institutions my family used. By 9, my phone had 67 notifications. I ignored them all and called a real estate agent instead, explaining I needed a short-term rental with option to buy, budget flexible, available immediately. The urgency in my voice must have communicated itself because she promised to send listings that same day. I worked through the morning, focusing on a branding project due the following week. The familiar rhythm of design calmed me, the creative flow pushing away the lingering thoughts of the previous night. Around noon, I finally checked my messages. My mother had progressed from concern to full-blown anger. Your behavior was completely inappropriate. Adam was embarrassed in front of his colleagues. We expect an apology. My father was more direct. This childish attention-seeking needs to stop. Call your mother. But then, there were 3 messages from numbers I didn't recognize. The first was from Harold Peterson. Your brother's comments were out of line. If you're interested in design work for our firm's rebranding, please call me. The second was from Adam's colleague, Stephanie. That was the most dignified exit I've ever witnessed. Adam was wrong about you. Let me know if you need a good lawyer. The third was from my cousin Taylor, my only relative who had chosen a non-traditional path. Whatever you're doing, I support you. Been there. Call me if you need a friendly voice. These unexpected allies brought the first tears since the incident. I hadn't realized how completely I'd internalized my family's narrative about my isolation and failure. There were people who saw me differently, who recognized something in me worth supporting. I saved their numbers but wasn't ready to respond yet. I spent that first week in a productive blur. During the day, I worked on client projects with new intensity. Evenings were dedicated to researching locations where I might restart my life. I considered New York, Chicago, Seattle, anywhere with a strong creative economy and absolutely no family connections. I interviewed 3 potential assistants who could work remotely, eventually hiring Zach, a recent design school graduate with excellent organizational skills and no ties to Boston's interconnected social world. My mother's texts grew increasingly frantic as the days passed without response. By day 5, she was threatening to file a missing persons report, even though I had clearly told her I was safe and needed space. I finally responded with a formal email copying my father. I am not missing. I am taking necessary space from a family dynamic that has become harmful to my well-being. I am safe, employed, and housed. Please do not contact the authorities with false concerns, as that would waste their resources and damage our relationship further. I will reach out when I am ready to communicate. The response came within minutes. A lengthy email from my father detailing all the ways they had supported me, the sacrifices they had made, and the ingratitude I was showing. He referenced family therapy, as though it were a threat rather than a potentially helpful suggestion. The message contained not one word of apology for Adam's behavior or acknowledgement of why I might have been hurt. I forwarded the email to a new therapist I had scheduled an appointment with, adding context for our first session tomorrow. 10 days after the party, I found my new home, a loft apartment in Philadelphia's Arts District. The real estate agent sent a virtual tour, highlighting the Northern Light, perfect for a studio, the building's community of creative professionals, and the reasonable cost of living compared to Boston. I signed a 6-month lease with an option to buy and booked a moving company for the following week. I wrote a cordial, professional letter to my landlord, enclosed a check for the lease termination fee, and arranged for a cleaning service. I updated my business address on all official documents and my website. I opened new accounts at a national bank with no Boston presence. I found a veterinarian in Philadelphia for Jasper. Methodically, I untangled my life from its Boston roots. Each practical step felt like removing a weight I hadn't known I was carrying. The night before leaving Boston, I drove to my apartment to collect a few remaining items. I half expected to find my parents waiting, ready for a dramatic confrontation. Instead, the building was quiet, my apartment clean and empty, looking smaller than I remembered. I left my keys on the counter along with a note for the landlord, thanking him for 5 good years. As I carried the last box to my car, I realized I hadn't cried since that first day in the hotel. The pain had transformed into purposeful action. Each decision a step toward a self-determined life. The drive to Philadelphia the next morning felt symbolic. Sunrise at my back as I headed south and west, toward a city where no one knew me as Adam's underachieving sister or the Harrisons' disappointing daughter. I was simply a graphic designer, new tenant, cat owner, person in progress. I had no illusions that geographic distance alone would heal the wounds inflicted over decades. But as the Boston skyline disappeared in my rearview mirror, I allowed myself to imagine a life defined by my own values rather than my family's expectations. That possibility alone made the road ahead look brighter than the one behind. Philadelphia welcomed me with neither fanfare nor resistance, just the neutral acceptance of a city accustomed to reinvention. My loft apartment occupied the third floor of a converted textile factory, all exposed brick and oversized windows. The building housed a community of creative professionals, a photographer, several writers, a furniture maker, and a small advertising agency on the ground floor. They nodded hello in the hallways but asked few questions, respecting the unspoken understanding that everyone had their own story, their own reasons for being there. I established my new studio methodically. The southern half of the loft became my workspace, with drafting tables, computer setup, and a meeting area for the occasional in-person client. The northern portion I designated as living space, though the boundaries often blurred. Jasper claimed a sunny window seat, seemingly unbothered by the change in scenery. For the first month, I maintained radio silence with my family, despite escalating attempts at contact. My mother progressed from concerned texts to emotional voicemails to a remarkably tone-deaf email suggesting I was having a nervous breakdown because I couldn't handle Adam's success. My father took a more direct approach, using his hospital connections to obtain my new address and sending a certified letter reminding me of all the ways I had disappointed them over the years, culminating in my ungrateful departure. The letter concluded with a statement that when I was ready to apologize and behave like an adult, they would welcome me back into the family. I scanned both communications and forwarded them to Dr. Melissa Jenkins, the therapist I had started seeing weekly. In our sessions, she helped me recognize patterns I had normalized, the constant comparisons, the dismissal of my achievements, the subtle undermining of my confidence. We worked on separating my self-worth from their approval, a process that felt like untangling a lifetime of twisted threads. When my family's attempts at contact went unanswered, they recruited extended family members to reach out. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't spoken with in years suddenly texted with casual, "How are you?" that inevitably led to, "Don't you think you're being hard on your parents?" questions. I responded politely but firmly that I was taking necessary space for my well-being and would appreciate their respect for that boundary. Only Cousin Taylor remained a genuine ally, calling occasionally to check in without pressure or judgment. When I eventually told her the full story of the promotion party, her response was refreshingly direct. "What an absolute dick move. You deserve better. This family has a serious problem with anyone coloring outside the lines." As the weeks turned into months, I immersed myself in building my business in this new city. I joined the Philadelphia Graphic Artists Guild, attending monthly meetings and gradually forming professional connections. I accepted an invitation to speak at a community college about entrepreneurship in creative fields, sharing my journey with students who reminded me so much of my younger self. 6 months after the move, I received an unexpected email from Harold Peterson, the founding partner of Adam's law firm. He remembered our brief conversation at the promotion party and was impressed by both my portfolio and my dignified exit that night. His firm was undergoing a complete rebranding, and he wanted to know if I would consider submitting a proposal. The irony was impossible to miss. My first major opportunity in my new life, coming from the very event that had ended my old one. I accepted the invitation, putting together the most professional presentation of my career. When I returned to Boston for the pitch meeting, I stayed in a hotel, told no one in my family I was in town, and focused entirely on the business at hand. To my surprise and delight, the firm selected my proposal over those from several larger agencies, citing the personal attention and fresh perspective I offered. The project took 3 months to complete and led to referrals to 2 other Boston law firms. I hired Zach full-time to handle the increased workload and brought on a junior designer named Mia, a recent art school graduate with exceptional talent but no connections. I recognized in her the same hunger to prove herself that had driven me for years. Around this time, I received my first communication from Adam since the night of his promotion. His email was brief and, naturally, unapologetic. "I hear you're working with Peterson and Mitchell now, using my connections to build your business." "You're welcome. Let's put this family drama behind us. Mom and Dad's anniversary is coming up. I read it twice before crafting a response. Adam, my business relationship with Peterson and Mitchell is based on my professional capabilities, which Harold Peterson recognized independently. I didn't use your name to secure the contract, nor would I. Regarding our family situation, what you perceive as drama, I experience as necessary boundaries. Your comments at your promotion party were merely the final example of a lifelong pattern of dismissal and disrespect. Until there is genuine acknowledgement and apology for that pattern, I have nothing further to discuss. I wish you continued success in your career. Jenna, I didn't receive a reply, nor did I expect one, but composing the email without anger, without that desperate, aching need for his approval, felt like concrete evidence of my growing emotional independence. As my first year in Philadelphia drew to a close, my business had expanded beyond my initial expectations. The Peterson and Mitchell project led to a feature in a design industry magazine, highlighting my approach to rebranding traditional institutions. The exposure brought inquiries from companies across the Northeast, allowing me to be selective about which projects I accepted. With financial security came the confidence to explore new creative directions. I developed a series of workshops for self-taught artists navigating the business side of creative careers. Drawing from my own experience, I addressed the practical challenges and emotional obstacles that weren't covered in traditional education. The first workshop sold out within days, confirming that my unconventional path held immense value for others facing similar journeys. Through the workshops, I met Jordan, a web developer who specialized in creating platforms for artists. Our professional collaboration evolved into friendship and eventually a romantic relationship built on mutual respect and shared creative values. Unlike previous partners who had either pitted my family situation or encouraged reconciliation regardless of the cost, Jordan understood the importance of boundaries and self-respect. When I told him the full, painful story of the promotion party, his response was exactly what I needed. That must have hurt terribly. And your response was incredibly brave. With this growing support system of friends, colleagues, and my relationship with Jordan, I began to recognize that family could be chosen rather than merely inherited. These were people who valued me for exactly who I was, not who they wished I would become. Around the 18-month mark after leaving Boston, I received notification that I had been nominated for the Emerging Entrepreneur Award from the American Design Association. The irony was rich. My supposed lack of future had evolved into national recognition of my business acumen and creative leadership. The award ceremony would be held in New York, and I was expected to give a short acceptance speech if I won. I didn't tell my family about the nomination. Their validation was no longer necessary for me to recognize my own achievements. Instead, I invited Jordan, Mia, Zach, and Cousin Taylor to attend as my chosen guests. The night of the ceremony, wearing a designer dress I had easily afforded, I sat at a table surrounded by people who genuinely celebrated my success. When they called my name as the winner, the applause felt authentic rather than obligatory. Standing at the podium, looking out at a room full of industry peers who valued my work on its own merits, I felt a sense of belonging I had never, ever experienced in family gatherings. My speech acknowledged the untraditional path that had brought me there and thanked those who had supported my vision rather than trying to reshape it. I didn't mention my family directly, but I included a line that Taylor later told me made her tear up. Sometimes the most important step in finding your true path is having the courage to walk away from those who cannot see its value. The next morning, my phone contained congratulatory messages from colleagues and friends, but also an unexpected text from my mother. Saw your award online. Your father and I are confused about why we weren't invited or mentioned. When will this punishment end? Her message crystallized how little had changed in their perspective, how completely they had missed the point of my departure. It wasn't punishment, it was protection. I showed the text to Jordan, who simply said, "Still making it about them, huh?" I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I spent the day exploring New York with my chosen family, celebrating not just the award, but the life I had built from scratch. That evening, browsing through an art supply store, I realized I was genuinely happy. Not the performance of happiness I had maintained through years of family gatherings, but authentic joy built on self-determination and genuine connection. 2 years after walking out of Adam's promotion party, I had transformed from the family disappointment into an award-winning business owner with a thriving creative practice, meaningful relationships, and hard-won self-respect. The journey hadn't been easy or linear, but each step had carried me further from the limiting narrative my family had constructed and closer to the truth of who I could become when freed from their expectations. What I couldn't have anticipated was that the next phase of this journey would involve confronting the past directly rather than simply building around its absence. The opportunity to do so arrived unexpectedly, testing whether my newfound strengths could withstand direct contact with the people who had spent a lifetime undermining it. The industry conference in Chicago marked the third anniversary of my departure from Boston. I had been invited to speak on a panel about entrepreneurship in creative fields, sharing the stage with designers I had once admired from afar. My business had grown to a team of 6, with offices in both Philadelphia and New York. The days of questioning my path had long since faded, replaced by the quiet confidence that comes from building something truly enduring. During the networking lunch following our panel, I was deep in conversation with a potential client when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I found myself face to face with Adam for the first time since that night at the Fairmont Hotel. He looked essentially the same, perfectly tailored suit, confident posture, practiced smile. Yet something in his eyes had changed, a hint of uncertainty that had never, ever been there before. "Jenna," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I thought that was you on the speaker list. You look different." I nodded, maintaining my professional composure. "Adam, this is unexpected. Are you attending the conference?" He shook his head. "I'm representing a client who's sponsoring the event. I saw your name in the program." An awkward silence fell between us, 3 years of unspoken words creating an almost tangible barrier. Finally, Adam cleared his throat. "Do you have time for a coffee?" he asked, gesturing toward the hotel lobby. I considered refusing, using my busy schedule as an excuse, but curiosity prevailed. I excused myself from the potential client, promising to follow up later, and accompanied Adam to the lobby cafe. We sat at a small table by the window, both of us stiff and formal. Adam ordered an espresso while I chose herbal tea. When the server left, he studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're doing well," he observed. "I see your work everywhere now." The Madison Avenue campaign was particularly impressive. I was surprised he had noticed, much less remembered my work. "Thank you," I replied. "How are things at Peterson and Mitchell?" "Busy," he said. "I'm on track for managing partner next year." "Congratulations," I said, and I actually meant it. His ambition had always been clear, and his achievements were genuine, whatever I thought of his personal behavior. Another silence descended, heavier this time. Adam fidgeted with his espresso cup, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Look," he finally said, "about what happened at my promotion party." I waited, curious whether he would actually acknowledge the harm he'd caused or simply minimize it as family drama. "I was out of line," he admitted, surprising me completely. The joke wasn't funny, and it wasn't accurate. I knew that even then. "It wasn't a joke, Adam," I replied evenly. "It was public humiliation, and it wasn't isolated. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being diminished and dismissed by my own family." He flinched slightly, but didn't deny it. "I know. I've had time to think about it, especially after Harold Peterson took me aside the following week and asked me what kind of man publicly mocks his own sister for laughs." "That must have been uncomfortable," I observed, feeling a surge of gratitude toward the older lawyer who had seen my value when my own brother couldn't. "It was," Adam acknowledged, "especially since he followed it up by telling me you were doing the branding for the firm and your work was exceptional. He suggested I had misjudged you rather severely." I sipped my tea, letting the moment stretch. Adam had never been good at apologies. Acknowledgement was probably the best I could expect. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he continued, surprising me again. "But I want you to know I've regretted it. Not just because it made me look bad, but because it was wrong. You've built something impressive, completely on your own terms. That takes courage. I'm not sure I have." The admission cost him. I could see it in the tight set of his jaw. The golden child acknowledging his sister's strength challenged the narrative he'd constructed about himself as the family's success story. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It matters, even now." Mom and Dad ask about you, he said, shifting the conversation. They've seen your success. Dad even cut out that article about you in Business Monthly. I raised an eyebrow. Have they acknowledged they were wrong? Adam hesitated. They're still working through that part, but they miss you. They're getting older. Maybe there's room for a relationship that doesn't require you to be who they wanted you to be. I considered his words carefully. Is that possible? After a lifetime of their expectations, can they really accept who I actually am? I don't know, he admitted, but they're talking about trying. That's something. We finished our drinks in a more comfortable silence. As we prepared to leave, Adam handed me his business card with his personal number written on the back. No pressure, he said, but if you ever want to talk, or even just exchange occasional texts, I'd like that. The family dinners are pretty boring with just the three of us. I smiled slightly, remembering a time when those dinners had been torture for me. Yet now he found them lacking. I took the card and gave him my card in return. I'll think about it, I promised. And we parted ways, not as the close siblings we'd once been, but not as strangers either. Something new had formed in that cafe, the possibility of a relationship based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. A month later, I received an email from my mother. Unlike her previous communications, this one didn't demand or accuse. Instead, it was surprisingly reflective. Dear Jenna, Adam mentioned he saw you at the Chicago conference. He said you looked well and that your business is thriving. I've been following your success from afar through industry publications. Your father and I have been doing some reflecting, prompted in part by our age and in part by your continued absence from our lives. While we may not fully understand the choices you've made, we can see that they have led you to a place of success, and we hope happiness. We would like an opportunity to see you again on your terms. Perhaps a neutral meeting place for lunch or coffee when you're next in Boston. With love, Mom. I read the email several times, noting both its conciliatory tone and its careful avoidance of a direct apology. I forwarded it to Dr. Jenkins, who had helped me navigate the past 3 years of family separation. What do you think? I asked during our next session. What do you want? She countered in her typically direct way. I considered the question seriously. Not a fantasy reconciliation where they suddenly transformed into the supportive parents I'd always wanted. Not a continuation of complete estrangement either. Perhaps something in between, a limited relationship with clear boundaries. I want to be seen for who I am, I finally replied. Not as a disappointment or a project, or even as a success story they can now claim, just as myself, with all my complexities and choices. Then perhaps that's what you should tell them, she suggested. See if they're capable of meeting you there. I composed a careful response to my mother, agreeing to meet when I was next in Boston for business. I specified a cafe near my hotel rather than our old family haunts, a neutral territory where we could begin this tentative reconnection. 2 weeks later, I sat waiting at a table by the window, watching for their arrival. My parents entered precisely on time, my father scanning the room methodically, while my mother spotted me immediately. They looked older than I remembered, more fragile somehow, though still carrying themselves with the dignity of people accustomed to professional respect. The initial greetings were awkward, physical contact limited to brief, stilted hugs. We ordered coffee and pastries, making small talk about the weather and my flight. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "We've missed you, Jenna," he said formally, as though delivering prepared remarks. "Your mother and I have discussed the events that led to your departure at length." I noticed he didn't specifically mention Adam's behavior or their own. "I'm glad you've been successful," he continued. "The design award was quite prestigious, I understand." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "My work has been fulfilling, but I didn't agree to meet to discuss my professional achievements. I wanted to address the relationship dynamics that made it necessary for me to leave." My mother flinched slightly. "Must we rehash old grievances?" she asked. "Can't we simply move forward?" I shook my head. Moving forward requires understanding how we got here. For years, I was treated as less valuable because I chose a different path. Adam's comments at his promotion party weren't an isolated incident. They were the culmination of a family culture that consistently undermined and dismissed me. My father started to object, but my mother placed her hand on his arm. "There may be some truth to that," she acknowledged quietly. We had certain expectations, certain definitions of success. Your choices didn't fit those definitions, and we struggled to see beyond our own perspective. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more self-awareness than I'd ever heard from her before. I appreciate that recognition, I said. What I need going forward is respect for my choices, my business, and my boundaries. I've built a life I'm proud of. If you want to be part of that life, it needs to be on terms of mutual respect. My father nodded slowly. We can try, he said. We're not perfect, but we can try. We spent the rest of the meeting establishing parameters for this new relationship. Monthly phone calls, occasional visits, no unsolicited advice about my career or personal life. I made it clear that any backsliding into old patterns would result in me stepping back again. They agreed, though I could see the effort it took my father to accept these terms. As we prepared to leave, my mother hesitated, then asked, "Will you be at Christmas this year? We would very much like to have you there." I thought of the past 3 Christmases, spent with friends in Jordan, family relaxed gatherings, free from performance or judgment. "I'll consider it," I replied honestly. "But if I come, Jordan would come with me." "Your boyfriend?" My father asked. Adam mentioned him. "My partner," I corrected. "He's an important part of my life." They exchanged glances, but nodded in agreement. Our relationship remained a work in progress. In the following months, some conversations flowed naturally, while others triggered old patterns that required gentle but firm correction. My father struggled more than my mother with accepting me as an equal rather than a daughter to be guided. My mother made genuine efforts to ask about my work with real interest rather than polite tolerance. Adam and I established our own cautious reconnection, mostly through occasional texts about neutral topics. He sent articles related to my industry. I congratulated him on professional milestones. We weren't the close siblings of our earliest childhood, but we weren't adversaries either. 6 months after our cafe meeting, I accepted an invitation to Christmas dinner, bringing Jordan with me. The evening had tense moments, but also genuine laughter. When my father began to lecture me about tax planning for my business, I calmly reminded him of our boundary agreement. To his credit, he stopped mid-sentence and apologized. That night in our hotel room, Jordan asked if I regretted reconnecting with my family. "No," I said after careful consideration. "But I don't regret leaving either. I needed to find my own worth before I could interact with them in a healthy way. The distance gave me a perspective I couldn't have gained otherwise." The following spring, I was invited to deliver the commencement address at Philadelphia's Art College. Standing at the podium, facing hundreds of creative young people preparing to forge their own paths, I share the lessons of my journey without naming my family directly. Your worth isn't determined by degrees or titles or others' expectations. It's built through the courage to pursue your own vision, the resilience to weather rejection, and the wisdom to recognize when walking away is necessary for growth. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to create distance from those who cannot see your value. And sometimes, if you're fortunate, that distance creates space for new understanding on both sides. The most important lesson I've learned is that you don't need permission to define your own success. The path that others can't understand may be exactly the one you're meant to follow. Trust that journey, even when it's lonely. Build connections with those who celebrate rather than merely tolerate your choices. And remember that family can be found as well as born, created through mutual respect and genuine acceptance. As the graduates applauded, I spotted my parents and Adam sitting quietly in the back row. They had driven from Boston without telling me, a gesture that would have felt intrusive a year earlier, but now seemed like a genuine attempt to understand my world. After the ceremony, they approached somewhat hesitantly, aware they were entering my territory rather than theirs. "That was quite powerful," my father said, genuine respect in his voice. "You've become quite the speaker." "I always knew you were articulate," my mother added, "but seeing you inspire all these young people." She trailed off, emotion making her uncharacteristically wordless. "Thanks for coming," I said, including all 3 of them in my smile. "Would you like to join us for lunch? My team has a table reserved to celebrate." They accepted, and for the first time, entered my professional world as guests rather than judges. As I introduced them to my colleagues and friends, I watched them struggle and mostly succeed at seeing me through others' eyes, not as a family disappointment, but as a respected mentor, successful business owner, and valued friend. The journey wasn't complete, the healing not absolute. There would still be moments of miscommunication and old habits resurfacing. But standing there, surrounded by my chosen family and my birth family, I recognized that true independence had given me the strength to attempt reconciliation without losing myself in the process. The path forward wasn't about forgetting the past, but about ensuring it no longer controlled my future. That painful night at Adam's promotion party had ultimately forced me to claim my own narrative, to build a life based on self-defined success rather than external validation. That freedom was worth every difficult step of the journey. So, tell me, have you ever had to walk away from something familiar to find your true worth? What would you have done in my place? I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's connect.